When a maid's daughter walked into a billionaire's world and said, "Please, marry my mother," no one expected what came next, not even him. He lived by the clock, every second planned, every detail controlled. But on the night of a blind date he never wanted, she was late, 17 minutes late. And instead of the woman he was waiting for, a little girl walked into that high-rise restaurant, straight toward the billionaire who hated waiting. She looked him in the eye and said, "Please, marry my mother." In that moment, his empire of precision cracked. This isn't just a story about a missed dinner. It's the story of how a child's courage turned lateness into destiny, and a man of time into a man of heart. And before I forget, where are you watching from today? Leave a comment below. Enjoy the story. He built an empire on precision, but his world stopped for the two people who were never on his schedule. Elias Thorne stared at the empty chair across from him. In his world, lateness was not just an inconvenience. It was a deep and personal insult. It was a Tuesday night. The Cypress Room was an island of quiet expense, floating 20 floors above the city. The lights of the skyline glittered like spilled diamonds through the tall glass windows. Inside, there was only the low murmur of important voices, the soft clink of heavy silverware on fine china, and the scent of money. At a corner table, set for four, sat Elias Thorne. Elias was a man who wore his life like a perfectly tailored suit. Everything was in its place. His dark hair had not a single strand out of line. His shirt cuffs were exactly 1/2 inch beyond the sleeve of his dark, custom-woven jacket. On his wrist was a watch that did not just tell time. It measured it, dissected it, and proved he was its master. He did not like this. He did not like blind dates. His sister, Clara, had insisted. "Elias," she had pleaded, "you are 42 years old. You need air. You need to meet someone who doesn't work for you." So he had agreed. One dinner. Claire Jensen, his sister's friend's neighbor. A name with no face, no history. Across from him, his 10-year-old son, David, sat in silence. David was a small, serious echo of his father. He stared at a tablet screen, his fingers moving silently. The au pair had called in sick. A sudden fever. It was another crack in the day's precise schedule. Elias had been forced to bring him along. Elias glanced at his watch again. 7:17 p.m. The reservation was for 7 p.m. 17 minutes. His jaw tightened. He despised waiting. He hated the feeling of being stationary while the world moved on. It reminded him of things he had buried. A small boy on a cold cement step. A backpack heavy on his shoulders. Waiting for a car that never turned the corner. Waiting for a door that never opened. He had built an empire of steel and code to ensure he would never have to wait for anyone again. "Father." David's voice was soft, barely a whisper. Elias looked up. "Yes, David. Is she coming?" "People who are serious about their commitments arrive on time, David. Lateness is a sign of a disorganized mind." David nodded slowly, his eyes dropping back to the tablet. He understood the rules. Elias pressed his lips into a thin line. He was about to signal the maitre d' when a small figure entered his vision. It was not a waiter. It was a girl. She looked to be about 10 years old. She had a cascade of messy blonde hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a bright yellow jacket that seemed to absorb all the soft, expensive light in the room. She was not wandering. She was walking with purpose. She moved between the tables, ignoring the surprised looks from other diners. She walked directly toward his table. Elias watched, his irritation turning to confusion. The girl stopped a few feet away. She looked at him, then at David, then back at him. Her eyes were bright blue and very serious. "Are you Mr. Elias Thorne?" she asked. Her voice was clear and polite. Elias froze. He did not know this child. "I am." The girl took a small breath, as if preparing a speech. "My name is Sophie Jensen. My mother is Claire Jensen. She is very, very sorry she is late." Elias stared. He had expected a text message, a flustered call to the restaurant. He had not expected a 10-year-old herald. David looked up from his tablet, his eyes wide with curiosity. "My mommy says to tell you that the number 42 bus broke down on Elm Street. The engine just stopped. She said she and the other passengers had to wait, but the next bus was too full. So she walked." "She walked," Elias repeated, the words feeling strange in his mouth. "Yes, sir. It's 28 blocks from there. She ran the last 3, so she wouldn't be any later. She's just in the lobby now, fixing her hair." Sophie delivered the report with perfect, grave accuracy. She wanted you to know she didn't just forget. Elias felt a strange sensation. The tight muscle in his jaw relaxed, just a fraction. He had been forgotten once. This woman, this Claire Jensen, had run 28 blocks to not be late. "Thank you, Sophie," Elias said, his voice stiffer than he intended. Just then, a woman hurried into view, her face flushed. "Sophie, oh goodness. I told you to wait for me by the ferns." She came to a stop beside the girl, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. This must be Claire Jensen. She was not what he expected, though he wasn't sure what he had expected. She was tall and slender, with the same bright blonde hair as her daughter, though hers was pulled into a simple, slightly messy bun. Strands of it had escaped during her run, framing a face that was open and honest. She wore a simple navy blue dress. It was clean, pressed, but plain. It was the kind of dress one wears when they have only one good dress. She clutched a worn handbag to her chest. She looked, Elias thought, completely out of place in the Cypress room. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice a little breathless. "I am so terribly sorry. The bus, it just died." Your daughter has explained," Elias said, cutting her off. He motioned to the empty chairs. "Please, sit." Claire exhaled, a shaky breath of relief, and guided Sophie into one chair before sitting in the other. She slid her handbag under the table, her eyes darting around the room for just a moment. She looked like a small boat tossed into a deep harbor. Then her eyes met his. There was no apology in them now, just sincerity. "I don't usually bring my daughter to, well, anywhere like this. My neighbor was supposed to watch her, but her own son got sick. It was this, or cancel. I didn't want to cancel. I also brought my son," Elias said, nodding toward David. Claire's face softened as she looked at the boy. "Oh, hello there." David gave a tiny, shy wave, his eyes flicking from Claire to Sophie. "This is David," Elias said. "It's nice to meet you, David," Claire said warmly. "This is Sophie. We met," Sophie said, smiling at David. "I like your tablet. Does it have Castle Builders?" David blinked. "It does. How did you know?" "I saw the icon," Sophie said. "I'm on level 40. I built the Dragon's Keep." David's entire posture changed. He sat up straighter. "Level 40? I'm stuck on 38. The lava bridge keeps collapsing." "Oh, that's easy," Sophie said, leaning in. "You don't use the stone blocks. You have to use the obsidian. The game cheats. You have to find it behind the waterfall." A waiter appeared, silent and swift. "Good evening. May I get you something to drink?" The spell was broken. Claire looked at the man, then at the heavy, leather-bound menu he offered her. She opened it, and Elias watched her eyes scan the prices. He saw a flicker of panic, so fast he might have missed it if he hadn't been watching. I'll just have water, thank you," she said. "I'll have a sparkling water." "David, the same," Elias said. "Sophie," Claire asked, "can I have a ginger ale?" Sophie asked, her eyes bright. "Of course," Elias said, nodding to the waiter, who vanished. An awkward silence settled over the table. Elias was a man who led boardrooms. He negotiated billion-dollar deals. But he had no idea what to say to this woman in a simple blue dress. "So," Claire said, folding her hands on the table, "your sister Clara set this up." "She did," Elias agreed. "She can be insistent." "That sounds like Clara," Claire smiled. "Her friend, my neighbor Martha, is the same way. They decided we were both too lonely." Elias bristled slightly at the word. "I am not lonely. I am busy." "Of course," Claire said, her smile not fading. "I'm busy too. I'm a maid. At the Grand Orion Hotel." She said it simply. "I'm a maid. Not, I work in hospitality. Not, I'm in housekeeping management." She said it like one might say, "I'm a doctor," or "I'm a lawyer." It was a fact, stated without shame and without pride. It just was. Elias found himself momentarily speechless. His sister had set him up with a maid. He felt a flash of irritation at Clara. What was she thinking? But then he looked at Sophie, who was now quietly explaining her gaming strategy to David. David was listening, really listening, his tablet forgotten on the table. "Mommy," Sophie suddenly said, turning to Claire. "Mr. Thorne has a watch, just like Pop Pop's." Claire's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, Sophie, honey, I don't think." "It's not," Sophie insisted, pointing. Pop Pop's had a different band, but it had all the little circles inside. He said they were for measuring hero time. Elias looked down at his Patek Philippe, a watch that cost more than a house. He looked at Claire, whose expression was a mix of embarrassment and affection. Pop was my great-grandfather, Sophie explained to Elias. He was a war hero. He was in the 101st Airborne. He jumped into France on D-Day. Elias felt that strange sensation again, that loosening in his chest. His own grandfather had served. He had built his first company on the small inheritance his grandfather, a stern, disciplined man, had left him. The 101st, Elias said, his voice softer. That was remarkable. A remarkable generation. He was, Claire said quietly. He passed away 3 years ago. Sophie still misses him fiercely. He left her his medals. She keeps them in a little velvet box. He said heroes aren't afraid, Sophie added. And they're always on time. Well, Claire said, with a strained laugh. I failed that one tonight, didn't I? But you ran, Sophie said. That counts. Elias watched them. The easy, loving exchange. The shared history. It was a world away from his own, a world of silent dinners and performance reviews, even with his own son. The waiter returned with the drinks. As he set them down, David, excited by the conversation, reached for his water glass too quickly. His elbow bumped the glass, sending ice-cold water spilling directly into Claire's lap. Oh, Claire gasped, jumping back as the water soaked the front of her navy blue dress. David, Elias snapped, his voice sharp. Pay attention. You are 10 years old. You know better than to grab. David flinched, his face instantly pale with shame. I'm sorry. I didn't. It's okay, Claire said quickly, grabbing her small napkin and dabbing at the spill. It's just water. Really, it's fine. She looked at David, who looked like he was about to cry. Hey, it's okay. I spilled a whole tray of orange juice at work last week. It happens to everyone. David looked at her, his fear fading slightly. Elias watched the exchange. His first instinct had been correction. Her first instinct had been kindness. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. With a smooth, practiced motion, he pulled out a perfectly folded square of white linen. A handkerchief. He leaned forward, offering it to her. This will be more effective than that paper napkin. Claire stilled. She looked from the handkerchief to his face. She hadn't expected the gesture. He was the man who had just snapped at his own son for a simple accident. And yet, here he was, offering this small, old-fashioned courtesy. Thank you, she said softly. She took the cloth from him. Their fingers brushed for just a second. Her hand was not soft. It was the hand of a worker, with calloused palms and clean, short-filed nails. She blotted her dress, the fine linen absorbing the water. You're not what I expected, she said quietly, not looking up. Elias tilted his head. And what did you expect? She finally met his gaze. I don't know. Someone harder, maybe. Less kind. I am not kind, Elias said, though the word felt strange. I am practical. Most practical men don't carry linen handkerchiefs anymore, she countered, a small smile playing on her lips. I am not most men, he replied. The tension broke. Claire smiled, a real, warm smile that lit up her face. No, she said, looking down at the damp spot on her dress. I am beginning to see that. Sophie and David were already back to talking about their game, oblivious to the small, quiet shift that had just happened between the adults. They ordered dinner. Elias chose the salmon. Claire, after another hesitant look at the menu, chose the simplest chicken dish. Elias, seeing her hesitation, quietly ordered the grilled cheese from the bar menu for Sophie and a simple pasta for David. The conversation, surprisingly, began to flow. She asked him about his work. He spoke of data, of systems, of efficiency. She listened, genuinely interested. He asked her about her work. She spoke of the people she met, the small stories she saw, the businessman who always left a frantic mess, the elderly couple who visited every anniversary and always left her a $5 tip and a thank you note. She spoke of her life, not as a complaint, but as a series of facts. She lived in a small, one-bedroom apartment. Sophie slept in the bedroom, and she slept on a pull-out sofa in the living room. She worked 6 days a week. It's hard, she admitted, but it's ours. And Sophie is a good kid. She makes it easy. Elias looked at his own son, who was now laughing. A quiet, breathy laugh, but it was real. Sophie had drawn something on a napkin and pushed it toward him. David was smiling. Elias could not remember the last time he had seen his son smile like that. For the first time in years, Elias Thorne was not running a checklist in his mind. He was not calculating compatibility. He was not analyzing profit and loss. He was just there. When the check came, Elias placed his black credit card on the tray without looking at the total. Claire watched, her expression unreadable. She folded the damp, but drying, handkerchief and placed it on the table between them. I should wash this for you. That's not necessary, Elias said. It is, she insisted politely. It's a very nice handkerchief. I'll give it to Clara's friend, Martha, and she can get it back to your sister. Elias nodded, accepting her quiet dignity. They stood to leave. The children were buzzing. Fast friends forged over virtual castles. Can we see Sophie again? David asked Elias as they stood near the coat check, his voice hopeful. Elias paused. He looked at Claire, who was helping Sophie into her bright yellow jacket. She looked tired from her long day, her long run, and the stress of the dinner. But she looked strong. Perhaps, Elias said. Outside, the air was cool. A long, black Maybach sedan was idling at the curb, a driver standing beside the open rear door. David walked toward it automatically. Elias turned to Claire and Sophie. We will drive you home. Claire shook her head, pulling her thin coat tighter. Thank you, Mr. Thorne, but that's very kind. We'll take the bus. The stop is just 2 blocks away. Elias blinked. The bus? Of course, Claire said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. But it's late. And you have Sophie. The 9-line bus is very safe, Claire said, smiling. And Sophie likes it. She counts the red cars. It's our tradition. Sophie beamed. Last night, I counted 34. Elias stood on the curb, his driver holding the door, his son waiting in the car. He was offering comfort, efficiency, and safety. And this woman, this maid, was turning him down. Politely, firmly. She was not offended by the offer. She was simply not accepting it. Well, Claire said, holding out her hand. Thank you for dinner, Mr. Thorne. It was lovely. And David, it was so nice to meet you. It's Elias, he said, taking her hand. Her grip was firm. And it was a pleasure to meet you, Claire. And you, Sophie. Good night, Mr. Elias. Sophie chirped, waving. Tell David I'll send him the cheat code for the lava bridge. Elias nodded, a small, unfamiliar smile touching his own lips. I will. He watched them walk away. A woman in a simple blue dress and a girl in a yellow jacket. They did not look back. They turned the corner, heading toward the bus stop. He got into his car. The door shut with a heavy, silent thud. The car smelled of polished leather and quiet wealth. Home, sir? The driver asked. Elias stared out the window, at the corner where they had disappeared. Yes, Robert. Home. As the car pulled into traffic, David spoke from the silence. She was nice, father. Elias looked at his son. Yes, David. She was. And Sophie was smart. Yes. I like them. Elias looked away from his son and back at the city lights. He thought of a cold step. He thought of a woman running 28 blocks. He thought of a simple, clean apartment and a mother sleeping on a sofa so her daughter could have the bedroom. He felt something deep inside him, something old and structured. It was shifting. David was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not the tense, still silence of his father, but a soft, thoughtful one. They arrived at the gates of the Thorne estate. The black iron gates, tall and imposing, swung open without a sound. The car crunched up a long, winding gravel drive, past trees that were centuries old. The house was not a house. It was a statement. A vast structure of dark stone and modern glass. It loomed over the landscape, a fortress of quiet, controlled wealth. The car stopped. The driver opened the door. Elias stepped out. David followed. Inside, the home was vast and cold. The floors were polished marble that echoed every footstep. The walls were hung with art that was famous and expensive, but not personal. A housekeeper, Mrs. Peters, a woman in a gray uniform, met them at the door. Good evening, Mr. Thorne. Master David. Was the dinner satisfactory? It was, Mrs. Peters. Thank you. Elias was already unbuttoning his jacket. See that David gets ready for bed. Yes, sir. David looked up at his father. Father. Elias paused, halfway up the grand, floating staircase. Yes, David. Can Sophie send me the cheat code? Elias looked down at his son. You'll have to ask your au pair to set up the communication on the tablet. But how? I don't have her number. I will handle it, David. Go to bed. Yes, father. David turned and walked with Mrs. Peters down a long, white hallway. Elias watched him go. He saw the small, lonely set of his son's shoulders. He felt a sharp, unpleasant pang. He turned and continued up to his study. The study was his real home. It was dark wood, with one wall made entirely of glass, overlooking the city far below. He sat in his leather chair, but he did not open his laptop. He did not check the markets. He found himself thinking of a simple blue dress, of a hand calloused from work, of a woman who had run 28 blocks so she would not be rude. He had Claire's number. He could get Claire's. He picked up his phone. He typed a short, precise text to his sister. What is the last name of your friend's neighbor? The reply was instant. Jensen. Claire Jensen. Why? Was it awful? She's sweet, Elias. Elias ignored the questions. Jensen. He typed the name into a private search engine on his computer. Not a public one. This one dug deeper. Results flickered. Claire Jensen, 38. One dependent, Sophie Jensen, 10. Address in a modest, 5-story apartment building in the city's East End. No criminal record. One small claims court case, a dispute with a landlord, settled. She was a maid at the Grand Orion Hotel. Then he saw it. Cross-referenced under family members. Deceased, Sergeant Michael Jensen. Her grandfather. He clicked. The screen filled with old, black and white photos. A young man in uniform. Medals. A citation, signed by a general. Sergeant Michael Jensen. 101st Airborne. He had single-handedly taken out a machine gun nest in Bastogne, saving his entire platoon. He was a hero. The kind of man Elias's own grandfather had revered. Elias leaned back. The woman in the simple blue dress was the granddaughter of a man like this. A man of true, undeniable substance. He closed the file. He felt that strange shift again. The solid ground beneath his feet was moving. Miles away, in the East End, the world was very different. The one-bedroom apartment was small, but it was spotless. The furniture was old but clean. In the living room, a sofa had been pulled out, and on it, Claire Jensen was sitting. The television was off. In her small kitchen sink, she was gently hand-washing a square of white linen. She rinsed the soap from the handkerchief. The fabric was finer than anything she had ever touched. It was soft as silk, yet strong. She squeezed the water out, her knuckles red from the day's work. She thought of the man, Elias Thorne. He was not what she expected. He was hard, yes. The way he spoke to his son had made her heart ache. But then, he had offered her his handkerchief. He had listened to her stories about the hotel. He had looked at her, really looked at her. And his son, David, he was a quiet, sad little boy. Sophie, in her pajamas, padded out from the bedroom, rubbing her eyes. Mommy. Hey, sweetie. I thought you were asleep. I was. I heard you. Sophie came and curled up next to her on the pull-out bed. Why were you at the sink? I was just washing Mr. Thorne's handkerchief. The one he lent me when David spilled the water. Oh. Sophie picked at a loose thread on the quilt. He was sad. Mr. Thorne? No. David. He looked like I feel sometimes. When I'm the only one at the park. Claire's heart squeezed. She wrapped an arm around her daughter. Well, he wasn't alone tonight. You were there. He's rich, but he's lonely, Sophie said, with the simple wisdom of a child. We're not rich, but we're not lonely. Claire kissed the top of her blonde head. No, baby. We are definitely not lonely. She held the damp handkerchief in her hand. She would have to return it. She couldn't just give it to Martha to give to Clara. That felt wrong. It was his. She would have to return it to him. The thought of his office building, a steel tower she passed on her way to work, made her stomach flutter. The next morning, Elias was in a board meeting on the 50th floor of Thorne Industries. The profit margin on the T12 actuator is down 1.8%, a man in a gray suit was saying, pointing to a complex chart. We recommend divestment. Elias stared at the chart. He saw numbers. He saw projections. But his mind was seeing a bright yellow jacket. Elias? The man asked. Elias blinked. Your projection is flawed. You're not accounting for the seasonal dip in logistics. Hold the position. Next. He was distracted. He was annoyed that he was distracted. His assistant, Susan, a sharp, efficient woman in her 50s, leaned in. Sir, your sister is online too. She says it's urgent. Elias sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Patch her through to my earpiece. Elias. Clara's voice chirped in his ear. So? How is it? You never texted me back. Did you like her? She's a lovely person, isn't she? The dinner was adequate, Clara, Elias said, his voice low, while the meeting waited for him. Adequate. That's it. Elias, you've been alone for 5 years. Adequate isn't. I have to go, Clara. Wait. Did you know her daughter, Sophie, is related to Sergeant Michael Jensen, the war hero? Our grandfather knew him. He served in the same theater. Elias froze. He had not known that. His search had not revealed a personal connection. He did. Yes. Grandpa always told that story about the man who saved the entire company at Bastogne. That was him. Michael Jensen. Isn't that incredible? Elias looked out the window at the city. It was not incredible. It was something else. It was fate. It was a thread. I have to go, he said, and cut the connection. He stood up. The boardroom went silent. This meeting is over, he said. Hold the T12 position. He walked out, leaving his executives staring at each other. He went to his private office. He told Susan to hold all his calls. He looked at his phone. He had a decision to make. He was a man who hated complications. And Claire Jensen and her bright, honest daughter were the biggest complication he had faced in a decade. At that exact moment, Claire and Sophie were standing in the lobby of his building. It was, Claire thought, the most intimidating room she had ever been in. It was 3 stories high, all black marble and glass. A massive, abstract sculpture hung from the ceiling. Men and women in dark, expensive suits rushed past, not making eye contact. Claire clutched her worn handbag, and it was a small, neat envelope. Inside the envelope was the pressed, clean handkerchief. She was on her way to the hotel. Her shift started in 30 minutes. But this was on the way. She had told herself it was just practical. Drop it off. Get it over with. She approached the main reception desk, a slab of black stone that looked like an altar. The woman behind it was sharp and perfect, her hair pulled back. Can I help you? The woman asked, her voice cool. Yes. I have a package to leave for Mr. Elias Thorne, Claire said, her voice sounding small in the huge space. Mr. Thorne does not accept unsolicited packages. You can leave it with the mailroom, but I can't guarantee he will get it. Oh, Claire said, her face falling. It's personal. He'll know what it is. It's a handkerchief. The receptionist's eyebrow went up. A handkerchief. I'm sure it is. Ma'am, if you don't have an appointment. But my mom said she'd give it back, a small, clear voice said. The receptionist looked down. Sophie was standing beside her mother, her yellow jacket zipped up, her blonde ponytail high. Mom, you promised you'd give it back to Mr. Elias. He needs it, Sophie said. Honey, I'm trying. The lady says. Is there a problem here? Claire's heart stopped. She turned. Elias Thorne was standing right behind them. He was not in a meeting. He was not in his office. He had been waiting. He had been standing near a pillar, watching the lobby. He had seen them come in. Mr. Thorne, the receptionist said, her voice instantly changing. These people were insisting on leaving. It's fine, Helen, Elias said, his voice cutting her off. He looked at Claire. Mrs. Jensen. Sophie. Mr. Thorne. Elias. Claire said, her cheeks burning. I'm so sorry to bother you. I was on my way to work. I wanted to return this. She fumbled in her bag and pulled out the envelope, holding it out to him. He took it. Their fingers brushed again. He opened the flap and looked inside. He saw the perfectly folded, clean white square. You washed it, he said. It was not a question. Yes, of course. It was no trouble. It was kind, he said, looking at her. Really looking. He saw the flush on her cheeks. He saw the worn strap of her handbag. He saw the dignity in her eyes. Mommy, Sophie said, tugging on Claire's coat. Ask him. Sophie, hush. We have to go. Ask him if David is still sad. Claire went pale. Sophie, you do not ask people questions like that. I am so sorry, Mr. Thorne. Elias looked down at the 10-year-old girl. She was looking up at him, not with malice, not with rudeness, but with genuine, piercing concern. Is he sad, Mr. Thorne? Sophie asked again, quieter this time. He looked sad at dinner. Before we talked about the castle. He doesn't have a friend. Elias felt the words hit him. He doesn't have a friend. He looked at Claire, whose eyes were wide with embarrassment. He looked at the receptionist, who was pretending not to listen. He looked at the rushing suits in his lobby. And he made a decision. No. Elias said to Sophie. He doesn't. Not really. He then looked at Claire. His voice was firm, cutting through the noise of the lobby. I have an event. This Saturday. At my home. It's a fundraiser for the children's hospital. It's very casual. There is a petting zoo. And games. Claire just stared at him. David will be there. He asked to see Sophie again. I would like it, very much, if you would both come. As my personal guests. Claire was speechless. A party? At his house? A fundraiser? Oh no. Mr. Thorne, we couldn't possibly. I have to work on Saturday. And we wouldn't fit in. I will arrange for you to have the day off, Elias said, dismissing her first excuse. And you will fit in perfectly. It's for the children. He looked at her, and his voice softened, just a fraction. Please. It would mean a great deal to my son. And to me. The plea was naked. It was not a command from a billionaire. It was a request from a father. Claire looked at Sophie. Sophie's eyes were shining. A petting zoo, Mommy? Claire looked back at Elias. He was just a man, in a suit, in a lobby, asking for a kindness. She took a slow breath. Okay, Mr. Thorne. For the children. We would be happy to come. A small, genuine smile touched Elias's lips. Good. My car will pick you up. Saturday. 11 a.m. He nodded, a gesture of finality. He turned, the clean handkerchief still in his hand, and walked across the marble floor. He did not look back. Claire stood there for a long moment, her heart hammering against her ribs. Sophie was vibrating with excitement beside her. Mommy, a petting zoo. Can we pet a goat? I want to pet a goat. The receptionist, Helen, was staring at her. The cool mask of indifference was gone, replaced by a sharp, calculating curiosity. Claire felt the woman's gaze like a physical weight. Come on, honey, Claire said, taking Sophie's hand. We have to go. Mommy is going to be late for work. She walked out of the towering lobby, back into the bright, noisy street. She felt like she had just stepped out of a different, airless world. A car is picking us up, Mommy. A fancy car? Sophie asked, skipping to keep up. I guess so, baby. Claire's mind was spinning. She had gone to return a handkerchief. She had left with an invitation to a billionaire's party. She looked at her watch. 8:52 a.m. Her shift started in 8 minutes. She began to walk faster, almost running, just as she had for the blind date. As Claire and Sophie disappeared onto the street, Elias stepped into his private elevator. The door slid shut, sealing him in silence. He looked at the white linen in his hand. It smelled faintly of soap. Not expensive, perfumed soap. Just clean. The scent was simple and honest. He found it strangely comforting. The elevator opened directly into his office. His assistant, Susan, was waiting with a tablet. Sir, your 2:30 has been moved to 4. The logistics team needs your sign-off on the Singapore merger and... Susan, Elias interrupted. He walked to his desk and placed the handkerchief down carefully, as if it were a fragile piece of art. Call the Grand Orion Hotel. The general manager. What's his name? Thomas Bell, sir. Call Thomas Bell. Tell him Elias Thorne is requesting that one of his employees, Claire Jensen, be given a personal day this Saturday. Paid. It is for a private matter. He is to ensure it is handled discreetly and without complication. Susan's eyebrows rose, but she made no comment. She had worked for Elias for 15 years. She knew better than to ask questions. Yes, Mr. Thorne. Right away. And Susan, sir, find out what a 10-year-old girl would like at a party. Susan paused, the tablet in her hand. Sir, the party is for the children's hospital. We have the petting zoo, a magician, and an ice cream sundae bar. I know what we have, Elias said, his voice quiet. I am asking what she would like. Susan finally allowed herself a small, brief smile. I will look into it, sir. Thank you. Elias sat behind his desk. He looked at the handkerchief. He should put it away. It was just a piece of cloth. But for some reason, he left it sitting there, a small, white square against the dark, polished wood of his desk, for the rest of the day. The next few days were a blur for Claire. The call from her manager had been surreal. Mr. Bell, a man who barely knew her name, had called her into his office. He had been nervous. Miss Jensen, Claire, it seems you have this Saturday off. With pay. A personal request was made on your behalf. Claire knew instantly who it was. Oh, thank you, Mr. Bell. Is everything all right, Claire? He asked, his eyes full of questions she could not answer. Yes, sir. Thank you. She left his office, her coworkers staring at her. The whispers followed her down the hall. Who was she? Why did the big boss give her a day off? Now, she had a different problem. It was Friday night. The party was tomorrow. She stood in her small apartment, looking at the contents of her closet. It was not a big closet. There was her blue dress, the one she wore to the restaurant. There were her maid's uniforms. There were a few pairs of jeans and some simple blouses. Nothing in her closet belonged at a billionaire's estate. She sank onto her pull-out sofa, her head in her hands. The anxiety was a cold, heavy knot in her stomach. I can't go. I just can't. Sophie, already in her pajamas, came out of the bedroom. She had a small, velvet-covered box in her hands. What's wrong, Mommy? Oh, baby, I don't have anything to wear. Everyone there will be so fancy. I'll look silly. Sophie looked at her, confused. But Mr. Elias invited you. He didn't invite your clothes. Claire looked up, a sad smile on her face. It doesn't work that way, honey. People, they see the clothes first. Sophie sat down and opened the box. Inside, resting on faded purple velvet, were 3 military medals, an old pin, and a small, simple silver locket, tarnished with age. Pop said clothes are just wrapping paper, Sophie said, touching one of the heavy bronze medals. He said what's inside is the real present. He said you're the best present he ever knew. After Grandma, of course. Claire felt tears sting her eyes. She pulled her daughter close. You're right, baby. You're so right. Sophie pulled the silver locket from the box. It was on a thin, simple chain. You should wear this. It had been her great-grandmother's. Oh, Sophie. It's so old. It's important, Sophie said, pressing it into her hand. It's our family. Claire closed her hand around the small piece of metal. It was warm. She took a deep breath. She would wear her blue dress, the only good dress she owned, and she would wear the locket. She would go, not as a maid trying to fit in, but as Claire Jensen, as Sophie's mother, as Sergeant Michael Jensen's granddaughter. That was enough. Saturday morning, exactly at 11 a.m., a black car, longer than any Claire had ever seen, pulled up to their apartment building. It was not the Maybach. It was a large, black SUV, but it was just as intimidating. The driver, a different man, stepped out. He was polite, held the door for them, and did not speak. Sophie pressed her nose to the window as they drove. They left their neighborhood, with its small shops and brick buildings. They drove through the rich heart of the city. Then they went further, up into the hills, where the houses were hidden behind tall hedges and iron gates. Finally, they turned onto a long gravel drive. Claire's stomach did a slow, painful flip. The house was staggering. It was not a home. It was a museum. A fortress. It was made of glass and dark, imposing stone, and it sat on a hill overlooking the entire world. The driver opened their door. Music drifted on the air. The sound of laughter. Not loud, rowdy laughter, but the high, tinkling sound of polite, wealthy people. Mommy, Sophie whispered, grabbing her hand. It's big. It's just a house, honey. Claire whispered back, though her own heart was racing. She smoothed the front of her simple blue dress. She clutched the small, warm locket under the fabric. They walked up a stone path. The party was spread across a lawn so vast and green it looked like a carpet. There was a white tent. A string quartet played in one corner. Waiters in white jackets moved silently through the crowd, holding trays of champagne flutes and tiny, complicated-looking food. And yes, in the distance, there was a petting zoo. Sophie let out a small gasp. Claire scanned the crowd. Everyone was beautiful. The women wore bright, silk dresses and sharp, high-end casual wear. The men wore expensive linen shirts and pants. Claire felt her face burn. She felt, instantly, like her maid's uniform was showing through her dress. I don't see them, honey. Maybe we should. Sophie, a small voice called out. David Thorne was running toward them. He was not the silent, shy boy from the restaurant. He was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and he was smiling. Actually smiling. You came. Look, he pointed to the petting zoo. There's a goat. And they have 3 horned sheep. 3 horns. Sophie squealed, her shyness gone. Come on. I'll show you. David grabbed her hand. Come on. The 2 children, a small boy in expensive play clothes and a girl in jeans and her bright yellow jacket, which Claire had insisted she wear in case it got cold, ran off together. They didn't look back. They just went. Claire was left standing alone on the edge of the perfect lawn. She clutched her small, worn handbag. She was an island. A dozen pairs of eyes glanced at her, assessed her simple dress, her plain shoes, her non-existent jewelry, and dismissed her. A woman with sharp blonde hair and a diamond bracelet that cost more than Claire's car laughed at something her friend said, her eyes flicking to Claire and then away. Claire's stomach twisted. This was a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. She should never have come. She looked for an exit. She just wanted to find a quiet corner, wait for Sophie, and go home. I was wondering when you would arrive. Elias's voice. She turned. He was standing beside her. He was not wearing a suit. He wore dark trousers and a simple, perfectly ironed white shirt, the sleeves rolled up his forearms. He looked younger, more relaxed, almost normal. Mr. Thorne. Elias, she said, her voice shaky. Your home it's beautiful. It's a house, he said, echoing her words from earlier. A practical structure. He looked at the crowd, then back at her. He saw the tension in her shoulders. He saw the way she clutched her bag. You look uncomfortable, he said. It was a simple, flat statement of fact. Claire flushed. I'm not used to all this. Neither am I, he said. Claire looked at him. But it's your party. It is a required function, Elias said. A social obligation for the hospital. I do not enjoy this. He gestured to the mingling, laughing crowd. He looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the simple blue dress. He saw her hand move, unconsciously, to her neck, to the spot where the locket was hidden. My son, however, he said, a small, new warmth in his voice, is enjoying himself. For the first time in a long time. He nodded toward the petting zoo. David and Sophie were side by side, fearlessly petting a grumpy-looking black goat. David was laughing. A real, open-mouthed laugh. Claire felt the knot in her chest loosen. She's good at that. Making friends. She is good, Elias agreed. She is open. A man in a pale blue linen suit approached them. Elias. Marvelous party, as always. The governor is looking for you. Elias did not take his eyes off Claire. He will find me, James. The man, James, looked at Claire, his smile faltering. He assessed her, just as the women had. He looked back at Elias, confused. And this is? James asked. Elias turned, his body positioning itself slightly, subtly, between Claire and the man. This is Mrs. Claire Jensen, a personal guest. His tone was mild, but the message was steel. She is with me. She is not to be questioned. The man's eyes widened slightly. Oh, of course. A pleasure, Mrs. Jensen. He gave a stiff nod and moved away quickly. Claire stared at him. You did that on purpose. I am a practical man, Elias said. The shortest distance between a problem and a solution is a straight line. Come, let me get you a ginger ale. He didn't offer her champagne. He remembered. He remembered what Sophie drank. He led her away from the center of the party, toward a quieter area near a large, old oak tree. The string quartet's music was softer here. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For the straight line. It was nothing. He handed her a glass. Clara told me about your grandfather. That he and my grandfather served in the same theater. Claire's hand went to her locket. Yes, he was a good man. Sophie, she adored him. He was the only father figure she ever really had. She said it simply, a fact, not a plea for sympathy. My grandfather was much the same for me, Elias said, his voice distant. He stared at the house. He was a difficult man. Hard. He believed in discipline above all else. He left me his company. But he never told me he was proud of me. Claire watched him. This was the most personal thing he had ever said. He was the billionaire, the master of the universe. And he was still just a man, waiting for a word of praise from a man long gone. I think, Claire said softly, he would be proud of David. Elias's head snapped toward her. He looked surprised, as if the thought had never occurred to him. He looked over at his son, who was now showing Sophie a small, hidden garden path. Yes, Elias said, his voice thick. Yes, I think he would. Before he could say more, a woman's sharp, high voice cut through the air. David, darling, get away from her. A tall woman in a white dress was marching across the lawn. Her name was Amelia Vance. She was the daughter of a board member and a woman who had, for years, assumed she would one day be Mrs. Elias Thorne. She was marching toward David and Sophie. Her jacket is filthy. You'll catch something. Get away. Sophie froze, her hand dropping from David's. She looked down at her bright yellow jacket, which now had a small streak of mud on it from the goat. She shrank back, her eyes wide with hurt. David, who normally would have wilted, stepped in front of her. It's just mud. Stop it. Don't you talk back to me, young man. Amelia snapped. Claire's glass hit the small table. She was moving before she even thought. But Elias was faster. He crossed the lawn in 10 long, furious strides. His voice was not loud, but it was cold enough to freeze the sun. Amelia. The woman stopped, spinning around. Elias. Thank goodness. This little girl, she is my guest, Elias said. Amelia's face went white. You're your guest? But she's in jeans. And you, Elias said, are leaving. Now. He didn't wait for a reply. He walked past her, his back to her. He knelt, putting himself on eye level with the 2 children. Claire had just reached them, her heart pounding. Elias looked at Sophie. Her lower lip was trembling. Are you all right, Sophie? Sophie nodded, wiping her nose on her sleeve. She said I was dirty. Elias's jaw was a hard line. He looked at David, who was standing protectively by Sophie's side. David, you did well. You protected your friend. I am proud of you. David's eyes went wide. He stared at his father. He had never, ever heard those words. I am proud of you. Elias stood. He looked at Claire. The fury was gone from his eyes, replaced by a deep, pained regret. Claire, I am sorry. That should not have happened. Claire took a shaky breath. She put her hands on Sophie's shoulders. It's okay. We're okay. But they weren't. The party had stopped. Everyone was watching. The whispers were starting. Sophie looked at the ground. Then she looked up at Elias. She looked at his sad eyes. She looked at the big, empty, beautiful house. She looked at David, who was still standing close to her. She seemed to make a decision. She stepped away from her mother. She walked right up to Elias Thorne. She looked him square in the eye, her own blue eyes serious and fierce, just like her great-grandfather's. Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice clear and carrying in the sudden silence. Yes, Sophie. My mommy is the best mommy. And she's not sad. And David, he's not sad when I'm here. I think you're sad, too. Elias just stared at her, speechless. I think, Sophie said, taking a small, brave breath. I think you should marry my mother. Then we could all live here. And then none of us would be lonely anymore. The silence on the lawn was absolute. The string quartet had stopped, and the murmur of 50 wealthy people vanished, as if even the breeze held its breath. Claire Jensen stood frozen, her hand still on Sophie's shoulder. Her face was a mask of pale, burning humiliation. She could feel every eye on her simple blue dress, on her 10-year-old daughter who had just proposed marriage to Elias Thorne. Amelia Vance, standing several feet away, let out a small, sharp laugh of disbelief. It was the only sound. Sophie, realizing the weight of the silence, looked up at her mother. Mommy, she whispered, her bravery suddenly failing her. Did I do it wrong? Claire's heart didn't just break, it shattered. No, baby. Claire choked out, her voice thick with unshed tears. She dropped to her knees, ignoring the damp grass, and pulled Sophie into a fierce hug. She buried her face in her daughter's blonde hair. No, you didn't do anything wrong. You were just being you. She stood up, pulling Sophie tightly against her side. She would not let them see her cry. She turned, her back to Elias, her back to the staring crowd. I am so sorry, she said, her voice shaking but clear. Mr. Thorne, I am so deeply sorry for this. We'll go right now. She began to walk, almost run, pulling Sophie with her. She just wanted to get to the long gravel drive, to the road, to anywhere but here. She's running. Can you believe the nerve? He just kicked Amelia out for her. The whispers rose up behind her, sharp as little knives. Claire, Elias's voice. It wasn't a command. It was a statement. She stopped, unable to move, but she could not turn around. She stood, rigid, facing the oak tree, her shoulders shaking. Please, she whispered, so low he almost couldn't hear it. Please, just let us go. Don't make this harder. I have no intention of making this harder, he said, his voice closer. I am, however, going to stop you from making a mistake. His footsteps crossed the grass. He walked past her, standing in front of her, blocking her path. The crowd faded. The world shrank to the few feet between them. Then, he did something no one expected. Elias Thorne, the man who controlled empires, who did not bend for markets or for men, slowly knelt. He knelt on the grass, in his expensive trousers, until his eyes were level with Sophie's. Sophie, who had been hiding her face against her mother's side, peeked out. "You are Sophie Jensen, correct?" Elias asked, his voice formal, but not cold. Sophie nodded, her eyes wide. "You are the great-granddaughter of Sergeant Michael Jensen," he stated. She nodded again. He was a man of great courage. He saw a problem, and he moved to fix it. He did not wait. "He was a hero," Sophie whispered. "Yes," Elias said. "And you, Sophie Jensen, are just like him. You saw a problem, and you offered the bravest, most direct solution you could think of." He looked at her, and a small, almost invisible smile touched his lips. It was, for the record, a very good solution. Very efficient. Sophie sniffled, a tiny smile breaking through her tears. "You were all lonely. It's not good to be lonely." "No," Elias agreed, his voice growing soft. "It is not." He turned his head slightly, still kneeling, to look up at Claire. "Your daughter," he said, "is extraordinary. She sees truth, things that the rest of us have spent years learning to ignore." Elias rose to his feet. He stood in front of Claire. He was close. Close enough for her to see the genuine, profound emotion in his eyes. "I am not going to marry you, Claire." Claire flinched, as if he had struck her. The words were a confirmation of her humiliation. From the lawn, Amelia's friends tittered. Elias heard them. He raised his voice, just slightly, so it carried across the lawn. "Marriage is a promise. It's the end of a long, serious negotiation. It's not a beginning. And I would not disrespect you, or what your daughter just offered, by treating it as a simple solution to loneliness." He paused, and his next words silenced the entire party. "But her premise," he said, his eyes locked on Claire's, "is correct. I am lonely, and my son is happier than I have ever seen him. And I have not, in 5 years, met anyone I would rather share a ginger ale with." He looked past her, at David, who was standing by the petting zoo, watching with a look of desperate hope on his face. "David," Elias called out. David flinched, startled to be called. "Yes, father. Do you want Sophie and Mrs. Jensen to leave?" "No," David shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "No, sir. I want them to stay. I want them to stay for the ice cream." Elias looked back at Claire. "The ice cream. That seems a more practical place to start than marriage. Don't you think?" Claire looked at him. He could have let her flee. He could have laughed it off. Instead, he had knelt. He had defended her. He had stayed. She let out the breath she had been holding, a shaky, tear-filled laugh. "Ice cream," she repeated, wiping her cheek. "Yes, that sounds like a very good start." Elias nodded, satisfied. He then turned to the lawn, his face changing, the brief warmth replaced by cool authority. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice booming with finality. "Your support for the hospital is appreciated. The event, however, is now over." A stunned, offended silence rippled through the guests. He was choosing this maid, over them. Elias watched them, his expression daring any of them to challenge him. No one did. Amelia Vance, her face a mask of rage, turned on her heel and was the first to leave. The rest followed, a slow, grudging river of silk and linen. They murmured as they went, but they went. In 10 minutes, the lawn was empty. It was just them, the 4 of them. David ran across the grass, skidding to a halt beside Sophie. Can we get ice cream now?" Elias looked at Claire. The question wasn't about ice cream. It was about everything. "Elias," Claire said, her voice finally steady. "You didn't have to do that. You dismissed everyone. They were guests," Elias said simply. "They were not friends. I am beginning, just now, to learn the difference." He looked at his son. He looked at Sophie. He looked at the woman standing in front of him, her simple blue dress stained with grass, her face stained with tears, wearing her great-grandmother's locket. "I have spent my life building things that are hard," Elias said, his voice quiet. "Steel, code, fortresses. I thought that was strength. I was wrong." He looked at her, his eyes full of a new, raw vulnerability. "Strength is running 28 blocks. Strength is sleeping on a sofa. Strength is standing on a lawn full of strangers and speaking the truth, no matter how much it costs." He held out his hand. I cannot, in good conscience, marry you, Claire. I don't know you. He took a breath. But I would like to. I would like to know you very, very much. Claire looked at his outstretched hand, then back to his eyes. She put her own hand into his. His fingers closed around hers, firm and warm. I'd like that, too, she whispered. Good, Elias said. He did not let go. So, ice cream? Sophie asked, tugging on her mother's other hand. Elias smiled. A real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Yes, he said. He looked at David. Go. Show them the Sunday bar. Get whatever you want. They don't have sheep ice cream. Father, David said, rolling his eyes, but he was grinning. He grabbed Sophie's hand. Come on, he yelled. I'll race you. The two children ran, laughing, toward the empty white tent. Elias and Claire stood on the lawn, hands linked, watching the children go. He's never done that, Elias said quietly. What? Claire asked. Laugh like that. Run. He's a boy. They're good for each other, Claire said, her heart full. You, Elias said, turning to her, his grip tightening just a fraction, are good for me. He had built his world on precision, a fortress of cold logic designed to ensure he would never be forgotten again. And in one day, a 10-year-old girl and her mother, a maid with a hero's courage, had breached all his walls. They hadn't torn his fortress down. They had just walked in. For the first time, Elias Thorne looked at the chaos of his empty, ruined party. He looked at the woman beside him. He heard his son's laughter. And he finally felt, deep in his bones, like he was home. 6 months later, the great stone house on the hill no longer echoed. It was a Saturday afternoon. The vast, modern kitchen, once the sole, silent territory of hired staff, was warm and smelled of cinnamon. Claire, wearing a simple knit sweater, stood by the marble island, watching as David and Sophie argued happily over a video game. They were sitting on the floor, their backs against the cabinets, a shared tablet between them. Elias walked in, not in a suit, but in jeans and a soft, worn shirt. He didn't check his watch. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around Claire from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. They've been at that level for 20 minutes, he murmured, his voice no longer carrying the boardroom's chill. They'll figure it out. They always do, Claire replied, leaning back against him. She still worked at the hotel, part-time. It was her choice. It keeps me grounded, she told him, and he had understood. He kissed her temple, his hand finding hers. He looked at the two children, their children. Sophie was now teaching David a cheat code she'd found. David was laughing, a sound that Elias now heard every day. He thought of the cold, empty chair in the restaurant. He thought of the man he had been, a man who built walls to keep the world out. Now he didn't need them. Claire hadn't torn his fortress down. She had just walked in, held his hand, and given him the code. He wasn't lonely. He was just home. And that's where we'll end the story for now. Whenever I share one of these, I hope it gives you a chance to step out of the everyday and just drift for a bit. I'd love to know what you were doing while listening. Maybe relaxing after work, on a late-night drive, or just winding down. Drop a line in the comments. I really do read them all. And if you want to make sure we cross paths again, hitting like and subscribing makes a huge difference. We are always trying to improve our stories, so feel free to also drop your feedback in the comments section below. Thanks for spending this time with me.